regardless of whether he was a flop or a success, and those are the people you value the most in your life and in the movie industry. I'm not naming them, but maybe you'd like to share that with the
tough.
audience.
My father, Soba, gave about 5 failures in a row as a film producer. Those days, it was not, there was no studio funding. There were personal financiers that gave you money. And then if you were not be able to return that money, you had to sell your jewelry and house. As dramatic as it sounds, it's what happened. Like we had to sell a flat, my mother's, my maternal grandmother's flat, so much jewelry. When there was a film called Muqaddar Ka Faisla that bombed in 1987, and then we made a film called Agnipat that met with no commercial success. So we actually went through really trying times. It was those times that I realized that, you know, as much as we call our industry a fraternity, it's not. The ground reality is that it's not. Failure is not a welcome guest in our world. And unfortunately, today I think people are a lot more sensitive because I think times have evolved, and I think so has the human core. But then I remember there were premieres that we used to get invited to, and when you got a row, A to Z was the general trajectory of where you sit. But certain screens had A starting from behind and certain screens from A starting from front. So when you were given C, you didn't know if C was right at the back or right in front. So I would call the cinema hall and check. And if I thought it was right in front and they were really embarrassing seats for my parents, I would go. You know, but I would tell Papa, don't go. And I would never tell him that, I would never say that the seat was bad. It was a code we had. I would just tell him that, Papa, I'll go and see this movie. That meant, don't come, the seats are not good. And we built this into an understanding. But I did see him upset sitting at home, even shed a tear. And to see your father cry in front of you sometimes or shed a tear when he was not a part of a film event or a party of a friend of the past who's no longer inviting you anymore. It's a very heartbreaking sight. When you see success and then you see failure, it's probably worse than never seeing success at all. I think that's like having that rug just ripped off your feet is a very, very heartbreaking feeling. And I've seen that. That's why today, I think that's what's grounded me as a human being, because I've seen my father go through that for over a decade and more. I've seen my mother, I've overheard their conversations where they didn't have the money to send me out. You know, I didn't want to study in India. I wanted like all the kids around me in Malabai, because as I said, I grew up in an affluent neighborhood. But I remember that putting all that energies back into what I did best is work in my city and try to do the best with my environment. But they seem like, you know, whenever I speak through my films, people feel like Zoya Akhtar and I spoke the other day and said that we are kind of cursed for our first world problems on celluloid. It's because like, oh, you don't make real films, and you've all been through a journey of loss, of love, of emotional meltdowns, but it doesn't mean that we express that on celluloid. Sometimes just selling a dream, even if it's a rich one, is good for the soul, and who doesn't like a good soul moment?
You know, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, Karan, was a game changer on many levels. It transformed, broke away from the formula, and it also, I think Manish is with us this evening, Malhotra, and all of you young, absolutely fresh thinking collaborators produced a film that shook up the film industry a lot. You changed the way the film looked, and you've spoken at length to Poonam about it and its making. And Poonam, do you want to tell the audience a little more about that chapter and that phase in his life? Because after that, nothing was the same again for Karan.
I think one of the most magical parts of the conversations we had was Karan's entry into the film industry as an assistant with Dilwale Dulhaniya and then making his own film, Kuch Kuch. But Kuch Kuch was really special because it was his first film. His parents were really nervous. They didn't know, what he was going to make. And then he made a film which turned out to be this huge hit, and which was a trendsetter and a game changer and everything, as you said. And it was actually, it's a very joyous and emotional part of the book. I don't know if you want to share with the audience. Do you remember you said how you couldn't even attend the premiere because you were in death threat?
Well, it was really strange. We were releasing the film on Friday, October the 19th, 1998. And on Monday, when we were making the premiere invites for the film, my mother very proudly, who actually on day one of the shoot of the film had asked me whether I know where to put the camera. And whether I still have, and she told me run. I said, run where? I mean, I can't leave my own house. And the film said, she's saying, if you don't want to make this film, run. And I said, how can the director just run away from the film set? So she said, I'm just worried you don't know what you're doing. Anyway, but she, by the end of it, was really proud, and we were doing the premiere invites, and that's when, there was a whole underworld zone at that time that was calling all the filmmakers. And I had gone down to drop my aunt, and I was wearing a red t-shirt. And someone from the underworld called my mother and said that your son's wearing a red t-shirt and we're going to shoot him right now. And my mother has, of course, panicked and got a semi-cardiac arrest. By the time I came up, she just held my hand, pushed me into the room and locked me in for some reason without really telling me why I'm locked in. Till the cops and my dad came, and I was banging the door like a Hindi film heroine, like get me out, because she was so nervous. Finally, when she got out and, I was told what has happened, we were all petrified. And she looked at me, she said, I hope this film flops, because we are simple middle class people, we don't want this underworld threats. So I was like, but, I don't know what to do. So the premiere happened, and the cops were all around me, and I was put into this room because they were like, you never know who's really at the premiere. So I was getting this blow-by-blow account from my assistants who can say, oh, they clapped here, or they laughed here. And in the end, the entire industry stood up and clapped at the end of Kuch Kuch Hota, and I wasn't there to see it. And it was really quite sad. And that very night, we took the flight to London because we had to get away. So I wasn't here for the first 3 weeks of the film's release. I was getting calls, like I remember the Tuesday of the first Tuesday of the film release on Friday, and Aditya Chopra, and I went to call him from the phone booth downstairs, and I had all my £1 coins I was putting in just to ask how the reception of the film is. And he told me, where are you right now? I said, I'm here, I'm standing on Marble Arch. And he said, you go buy yourself something big. Your film's a huge hit. And I started weeping in the middle of that phone booth because I was like, say that again. He said, your film's a blockbuster. I said, people like it. He said, I don't know if they like it, but they're coming to see it. And I went up, and meanwhile, my mother, who had become like Jaga Jasoos, who was staring at everybody from the window, thinking that everybody in London wants to attack me. And I didn't know if she was really happy or not, but we had a little bit of a family meltdown moment. When I told her, I said, Mummy, the movie's a big hit. So she's like, oh my God, you think that underworld man will call us again? And I was like, so it was a lot of Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gham going on in that moment. But at that point I realized that, oh my God, I have a career. Like, I did it. At 25, I made this film, and I'm so excited that now I don't have to kind of go to my plan B. It was like, it was something for a confused, nervous, overweight, doesn't know where to go child. I finally had a career, and I said, okay, even if I mess up after this, at least he'll remember me for my first film. I think I messed up a fair amount after that, but I'm still only remembered for Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, but I'm still proud of it and really excited.
But Karan, how different is the industry today? Is it harsher, more professional, less warm? What is the change since you made Kuch Kuch?
It's so much has changed. It's detached. That's the word I have to use. It's corporate, it's detached, it's over-ambitious, it's not personal anymore. When I started making movies in '98, there was the slight shift had begun. But when I hear stories of the 60s, 70s and 80s about how people made movies, even before that, the golden era before that, the warmth, the personal nature of things, the interrelationship between filmmakers, music composers, artists, the fun that everyone had. We don't have that. There's a lot of artificiality. There's a lot of corporate governance that makes us more hardcore, more cutthroat. I don't feel like you can make the kind of relationships that people did in the 40s and 50s and post that and subsequently. Today, I think if you have one single friend in the movie industry, you should be fortunate. Someone who really loves and cares for you and is as positive about your positivities. You should be blessed. It's not a country, it's not a, both ways. It's not a country or an industry of friendships. Unfortunately, and I don't say that as a cynic, I say that as a realist. And so if you're scoping for close friendships and intimate bonds in the fraternity, then I think you're looking in the wrong place. Unfortunately, there's nothing anyone can do about that. That is the order of the times. If you try to break that, you might lose the race. So it's a bit of a dichotomy, because while you want to handle your personal life, you don't want to let go of your professional status or existence. So all I really tell people is work. Keep your eye on the ball, keep your focus on what you're going to achieve and put out there as content, because that's the only thing that will last. Who's whose friend and who slept with who and who loves who and all that is so seasonal. Relationships are like mangoes, they come and go.